Yesterday, the brakes had a mushy feel. Beneath the truck, I uncovered my death warrant. It was 6:00 and I was crawling under my pickup, a steaming coffee just out of reach. My oil-stained fingers followed the brake line until they met empty space. A precise cut had gone through the reinforced steel. Hydraulic fluid dripped onto my face, reminding me of blood. The coppery taste of terror filled my mouth as the realization hit. Someone had attempted to murder me because of parking violations. Fast forward 3 months, and Karen Peton, the one-time queen of the HO, is on her knees in my driveway at 2 a.m., sobbing uncontrollably. Her designer suit is torn and filthy, with blood seeping from her broken fingernails as she frantically tries to tape a shredded $50,000 business contract back together. The very woman who had forced 17 families to leave was now pleading with me not to file charges. "Please, I'll do anything. I didn't mean it's too late for that, Karen, you see." During her efforts to end my life, I learned that her mansion is built 12 feet over my property line. Her own son captured her confession to attempted murder on tape, and her 8-year embezzlement activities were all documented. Karen severed my brake lines to keep me quiet. In doing so, she inadvertently authored her own eviction notice. What would you do if your HOA president attempted to take your life? Share your most outrageous neighbor horror story in the comments. Allow me to return to the start. March 15th was a truly awful moving day. I am Marcus Sullivan, 45, proprietor of Sullivan HVAC Solutions and, it seems, the most eternally optimistic divorced father. I had just come through a marriage that concluded with lawyers swarming like vultures, sold off all my possessions, and wagered my life savings on a new beginning in Willowbrook Estates. The house was ideal, a 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a separate garage that had the scent of engine oil. And opportunity. My daughter, Sophia, who was 16, genuinely smiled upon seeing her new room. It was the first authentic happiness I had seen from her since the start of the custody disputes. The sound of her laughter bouncing off the empty hallway walls was like hitting the jackpot. I'm a veteran of the Army Corps of Engineers, having spent 12 years erecting bridges in locations most people would struggle to pronounce. Military discipline instills one thing in your mind: record everything, measure twice before cutting once, and never accept authority at face value without checking. That meticulous, almost paranoid focus would, in fact, preserve my life. Willowbrook Estates appeared to be a suburban utopia. It consisted of 127 houses constructed during the Nixon administration, a place where retirees with meticulously kept golf course lawns lived alongside working-class families whose children left their bicycles in the driveways. The entire community had an aroma of newly mown grass blended with the charcoal fragrance of weekend barbecues. It was the epitome of the American dream. The HOA fees were $180 a month to cover landscaping and uphold community standards, which felt like a fair price for a tranquil existence. On my 3rd day after moving, I was unloading my work vehicle, a standard Ford F-250 with Sullivan HVAC displayed on the doors, when I heard the unmistakable sound of approaching trouble. Click-clack, click-clack, high-heeled shoes striking the pavement with the rhythm of a metronome heralding disaster. "Mr. Sullivan?" Karen Peton appeared as if summoned from a bureaucratic bad dream. Picture a real estate agent who seemed to have learned customer service at the Hitler Youth Summer Camp. She had perfectly coiffed hair, a designer BMW that likely cost more than the down payment on my house, and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her right hand, much like Captain Hook's prosthetic. "We must have a conversation about your property enhancements." I was standing amidst boxes with labels like kitchen clutter and Sophia's plush toys. "What enhancements?" "Ma'am, I've only been here for 72 hours. I still can't find my coffee machine." Karen's smile was so cold it could make antifreeze solidify. "Your commercial truck is in violation of Section 12.3 of our association's covenants. It is strictly forbidden to park commercial vehicles in residential driveways." That evening, sustained by coffee from a gas station and a burgeoning sense of paranoia, I laid out every HOA document on my kitchen table as if I were a detective trying to solve a series of murders. Section 12.3 was nowhere to be found. The covenants only extended to Section 1.7, which specified the acceptable colors for garbage cans. This is where Karen's malevolent brilliance was revealed. She wasn't just inventing rules at random. She was assessing my resilience. Would I fold as her past targets had? or would I resist and provide her with a justification to intensify her actions? In the second week, a fine of $75 showed up in my mailbox, like a parking citation issued by Satan himself. By week 3, the notice warned, legal proceedings will be initiated without delay. It was time for me to go to my first HOA meeting. The community center smelled of harsh industrial cleaning agents and unfulfilled aspirations. Only 12 residents from the 127 households were present. Karen conducted the meeting with the authority of Stalin, overseeing a purge trial, brushing aside my inquiries with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned. I have been doing this for a much longer time than you, Mr. Sullivan, a great deal longer. The menace in her tone seemed to make the room's fluorescent lighting grow fainter. Following the meeting, I embraced my inner investigator, delving into public records, county databases, and the local gossip channels. A clear pattern began to form, like bloodstains revealed under an ultraviolet light. 17 families had been driven out in 3 years. The targets were consistently minorities, single parents, or anyone Karen decided was not suitable for her ideal neighborhood. There was a Hispanic contractor whose English had a noticeable accent, a single mother whose autistic son was loud during his therapy sessions in the backyard, and an elderly black veteran whose disability payments were insufficient to maintain a lawn worthy of a country club. Each family was systematically broken down by escalating harassment until they were forced to leave. As I sat in my workshop at 2 a.m., enveloped by the metallic scent of my tools and the gravity of the situation, the reality struck me with the force of a sledgehammer. I was not merely the new resident. I was Karen Peton's next objective. The game was on, lady. Week 4 marked Karen's deployment of her ultimate weapon. The unannounced inspection blitz. I was 40 meters up, installing a commercial air conditioning unit, when my phone went off like a terrorist attack. Dad, there are people all over our property. Some witch with a clipboard is taking pictures of everything. She's laughing as she writes things down. I disregarded every traffic regulation on my way back. My tires screeched as I pulled into my driveway, where Karen was standing with a hapless city employee who looked as though he would prefer undergoing a root canal. The sound of his pen on the violation forms mingled with Karen's self-satisfied chuckles, creating a noise like fingernails on a poison-coated chalkboard. Mr. Sullivan, this is a routine compliance check. Karen's smile was so sour it could have made fresh milk curdle. This is Officer Bradley from Code Enforcement. It emerged that Karen and Bradley were golfing partners. What were the chances? Their list of fabricated violations included an unauthorized structure, my garden shed, which was present on the original 1987 property survey, improper drainage, referred to the natural incline of the land that had existed since the time of the dinosaurs, unapproved landscaping, was their term for flower beds that were older than my daughter. The total amount of this extortion was $450. Sophia later recalled Karen's pen clicking as if it were a bomb's timer. Each click represented more money. Dad, she was savoring it. It was time for me to launch a counteroffensive. My military background had instilled one thing in me. Document everything. Assume everyone is being deceptive. Trust no one without verification. I set up 4 security cameras equipped with night vision, covering every possible angle with audio recording and cloud storage. If Karen so much as breathed incorrectly on my property, I would have proof. Following that, I looked into her inspection. It took me 3 hours of sifting through county regulations to uncover something wonderful. Karen had made a monumental underservice. It is illegal to conduct a surprise inspection of private property without providing 48 hours written notice, having the correct authorization, and a valid reason for suspicion. What she had done amounted to criminal trespass masquerading as official procedure. I had read about HOA harassment methods in the office of my divorce attorney. He had an entire shelf dedicated to property law because many of his clients had been victimized by petty despots like Karen. The cardinal rule was that surprise inspections are a form of illegal harassment, full stop. Karen's reaction was both immediate and brutal. A full-scale social offensive, the neighborhood's Facebook group suddenly erupted with anonymous comments about falling property values and new, aggressive residents disturbing the peace of the community. The rumor mill was activated with the efficiency of Cold War intelligence operations. Mrs. Henderson, who had previously welcomed me with cookies, now seemed to suffer from sudden blindness whenever I was nearby. 3 of my neighbors ceased their friendly waves. 2 would cross the street to avoid any contact with me. However, Karen made one glorious error. She misjudged who my allies were. Walter Chun appeared at my doorstep one evening, holding a folder so thick it could have stopped a bullet. At 78 years old, he was a veteran of the Korean War and Karen's longest-standing target. Son, she attempted the exact same. With my family back in 1992. His weathered hands were shaking with fury, not from his age. Karen has been running this deception for 3 decades. Walter had managed to endure because his son was an attorney. He had documented everything. Fraudulent violations, patterns of harassment, and financial discrepancies. The evidence was both damning and magnificent. She had ruined the Ramirez family with noise complaints about their infants crying. She targeted the Johnsons with architectural violations for putting in a wheelchair ramp. Her strategy was always the same. Walter's files brought Karen's cleverness to light. She was careful not to leave any direct evidence. She consistently operated through concerned neighbors and city officials whom she had influenced with golf outings and political contributions. But I possessed something that Walter did not have in 1992. Contemporary technology and an engineer's fixation on numbers. As a homeowner, I was legally entitled to examine the HOA's financial records. The discoveries I made caused my calculator to practically overheat from activity. Karen had been embezzling our dues for years, using our own funds to support her campaigns of harassment. A $1,200 landscaping enhancement fee showed no corresponding visible improvements anywhere. There were numerous consulting fees paid to companies that existed solely in Karen's mind, and administrative expenses that necessitated $300 dinners at country clubs because, apparently, harassment works up an appetite. A review of 3 years of records uncovered a total of $23,000 in stolen funds. Every fabricated violation, every deceptive inspection, and every act of psychological torment was paid for with money taken from her victims. I had become familiar with financial fraud during my divorce, as my ex-wife had attempted to conceal assets. The method was the same. Fabricated expenses, non-existent suppliers, and exaggerated administrative charges. Karen was executing a classic embezzlement operation. The subsequent HOA meeting felt like stepping into hostile territory. It was held in the same community center, which still smelled of harsh industrial cleaning agents and unfulfilled aspirations. But on this occasion, I came armed with overwhelming evidence. Karen tried to control the agenda as she usually did, but I rose to my feet during the old business portion and dropped my bombshell. I wish to address $23,000 in unaccounted for HOA spending over the past 3 years. There was a profound silence, a complete and beautiful silence, broken only by the sound of a squeaky ceiling fan and the collective realization of 12 homeowners that they had been swindled. Karen's expression shifted through surprise, anger, and calculation, like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. If our financial management is not to your liking, Mr. Sullivan, you are always free to relocate to a place that better suits your standards. That was the wrong response, my dear. In fact, I have no plans to leave, but you might want to consult a lawyer, a very, very good one. For the first time in 8 years, someone had openly confronted the Queen. The other residents appeared like hostages who had just spotted rescue helicopters on the horizon. The fight was now out in the open. Karen's desperation unleashed her inner Photoshop psychopath. Week 6 brought fabricated evidence that would make dictators jealous. Monday morning, reviewing security footage with my first cup of coffee, I spot Karen creeping around my property at 3:00 a.m. like some suburban ninja, designer heels clicking on concrete, professional camera equipment, and what looked like a mobile counterfeiting operation running out of her BMW's back seat. By Tuesday, mysterious photos materialized in my mailbox, showing violations that existed only in Karen's deranged imagination. A garden hose improperly stored, when I had coiled it military perfect the night before. Trash cans blocking pedestrian access. When they sat 3 feet from the curb, the shadows were wrong, the lighting impossible, and one photo included a McDonald's cup that definitely wasn't mine, unless I'd started sleep-eating Big Macs. But Karen wasn't done playing digital dictator. She'd researched my client list through public HVAC permits, impressive detective work for a suburban terrorist, and launched her business assassination campaign. On Wednesday morning, my phone rang with a sound that signaled financial trouble. Mr. Sullivan, this is Janet from Riverside Medical Center. We are terminating your maintenance contract effective immediately. My stomach plunged to my work boots. Why? We have been informed that you are being investigated for code violations and unethical business practices. We cannot afford to be associated with unreliable contractors. 2 additional calls came in that day, with the same message and the same devastating result. $15,000 in income disappeared because Karen had turned my own success into a weapon against me. The taste of panic is metallic and sharp, similar to licking a car battery while your life falls apart. It was time for some professional paranoia. I enlisted Tommy Rodriguez, a retired detective who had dedicated 30 years to apprehending individuals who thought they were smarter than everyone else. It cost me $200 a day, but Tommy was an expert on predators. Your neighbor has some significant issues, Tommy stated after 3 days of watching her. She drinks by herself every evening after 7. Her husband stays away from the house as if it were contaminated. And she has been keeping a record of everyone who comes to your house. Tommy's intelligence gathering showed that Rick Peton was almost always at his office downtown. There were marital issues, potential extramarital affairs, and a clear effort to get away from his disturbed wife. Karen was feeling isolated, desperate, and was moving towards more aggressive actions. However, Tommy managed to capture Karen's fraudulent activities on video. She was using a professional camera and a laptop with photo editing software. Her face clearly in view, creating false evidence. Under the streetlights like a character in a suburban version of Breaking Bad, during my divorce, I had learned from my lawyer about digital forensics. Photos contain metadata fingerprints that can show they have been altered. Every doctored picture Karen produced was, in fact, contributing to the criminal case against her. She was essentially creating her own arrest warrant, one fabricated photo at a time. Week 8 was marked by Karen's most audacious move. An attempted murder presented as a vehicle maintenance issue. On Friday morning, as I was gathering my tools for a client appointment, my truck felt off. The brakes were spongy. The steering was loose. There was something fundamentally unsafe about a vehicle that had operated flawlessly for 8 years. The scent of hydraulic fluid struck me like a premonition of death. I called off the job and spent 2 hours under my truck with a creeper and a flashlight. What I discovered sent my blood pressure soaring to dangerous levels. The brake lines had been cut. With the precision of a surgeon, this was not due to wear and tear or an accident. It was intentional sabotage carried out with professional tools. Hydraulic fluid had pooled on the concrete, serving as evidence of Karen's murderous intentions. A single emergency stop on Highway 85 would have made me just another traffic fatality statistic. Karen's overconfidence led to her own undoing. My primary security cameras had conveniently stopped working that very night. Too much of a coincidence. However, I had a backup system she was unaware of, concealed in Walter's oak tree and triggered by motion sensors. While there was no footage of the sabotage itself, there was ample video of Karen's BMW loitering outside at 2 a.m., with someone inside timing their actions like a military operation. The following morning brought an unexpected form of rescue. Daniel Peton, Karen's 19-year-old son, appeared, looking as though he had aged 5 years in as many weeks. "Mr. Sullivan, I need to speak with you in private. It's concerning my mother." The young man's hands were trembling like leaves in autumn. He had dark rings under his eyes, and his posture was that of someone overwhelmed by family secrets. "She has completely lost her mind. Last night, she was talking about finding a permanent solution to the Marcus Sullivan problem. I believe she intends to cause you serious harm." Daniel disclosed that Karen had been intercepting my mail, which is a federal offense, making copies of my business documents, and keeping surveillance files on my family that included Sophia's school timetable and the locations of my clients. This was no longer just HOA harassment. It had escalated to stalking with the intent to murder. That evening, I went to the police and filed reports for attempted murder, mail theft, business sabotage, and criminal stalking. Detective Sarah Wilson treated the matter with utmost seriousness because I had concrete evidence. Video footage, photographs, documentation, and witness statements. "Mr. Sullivan, this situation has escalated from a simple neighborhood disagreement to a felony case. We are now investigating attempted murder, federal mail offenses, and organized harassment. Please, continue to document everything and contact us immediately if she takes any further action." I recalled something my divorce attorney had taught me. Harassment typically follows a predictable sequence of escalation, starting with financial attacks, moving to character assassination, then physical threats, and finally violence. Karen was adhering to this pattern perfectly. In the meantime, Walter began organizing neighborhood resistance meetings. 5 other families came forward with their own similar harrowing experiences, which brought to light Karen's 3-decade-long reign of terror, all financed by embezzled HOA funds. The community was starting to awaken, but Karen still had another move to make. Week 10 marked Karen's scorched earth approach to business, a form of insurance terrorism so ruthless it would make war criminals applaud. I was wrist-deep in a hospital's boiler system when my phone rang, its sound heralding financial ruin. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Linda from Mutual Insurance. We are canceling your policy, effective immediately." My wrench fell to the floor with a clang that sounded like a death knell. "On what grounds?" "We've received multiple reports of safety violations, customer complaints, and instances of negligent practices. We cannot afford to insure high-risk contractors." Karen had turned bureaucracy itself into a weapon. She had submitted fake customer complaints, fabricated safety violations, and forged incident reports. A masterful act of administrative terrorism that put my 15 years of business reputation in jeopardy. The metallic tang of panic mingled with the scent of industrial coolant as I came to the horrifying realization that she was methodically dismantling my livelihood. One phone call at a time. At the same time, she launched a massive attack on my contractor licenses by filing a barrage of false complaints with the state board. The accusations included professional misconduct, safety infractions, and customer fraud, creating enough paperwork to decimate a forest and my career along with it. However, Karen's overconfidence led to her most significant yet. On Wednesday evening, as I was watching Sophia perform in our town at school, she delivered a brilliant portrayal of Emily Webb's death scene. My phone vibrated with a frantic text from Daniel. "She's in your workshop at this very moment with bolt cutters and a camera." I attempted to stop her, but she is completely out of her mind. I remained for Sophia's curtain call, as she had earned that moment, but my hands trembled through the entire standing ovation, knowing that Karen was pillaging my business just 60 feet from where my daughter was sleeping. My concealed cameras recorded Karen's entire criminal act in stunning 4K detail. Her face was in clear view as she sorted through client contracts, took pictures of my proprietary HVAC blueprints, and packed business insurance papers into a canvas bag like a suburban cat burglar, completely unaware that she was the main character in a home movie that would lead to her felony conviction. The video evidence laid bare Karen's entire operation. She was not merely stealing. She was also photographing client details for rival companies, tampering with HVAC systems to create safety risks, and concocting evidence for her insurance fraud scheme. My training in Army intelligence had taught me a fundamental principle. Allow criminals to incriminate themselves while you meticulously document everything. Karen was, in effect, writing her own arrest warrant in real time on Thursday morning. Detective Wilson inspected my workshop with the satisfaction of someone who enjoys apprehending foolish criminals. Breaking and entering, business sabotage, theft of proprietary information, insurance fraud. She is now facing federal charges. This footage is a prosecutor's dream. However, Wilson cautioned me that Karen had reached her most dangerous point. Cornered individuals often resort to violence. She is no longer thinking rationally and has switched to a pure survival instinct. Be careful. Karen's growing panic became a source of entertainment for the neighborhood. On Thursday evening, smoke rose from her backyard as she burned documents in her fire pit, resembling a suburban Nixon trying to destroy the Watergate evidence. The sharp smell of burning contracts and desperation filled the evening air as neighbors came out to observe the spectacle. Mrs. Henderson, at last free from years of coercion, informed the authorities about the suspicious fire. As it turned out, destroying documents in a backyard fire is a violation of fire safety regulations and federal laws against tampering with evidence. Karen was, in fact, accumulating more charges against herself while providing a form of dinner theater for the entire block. Friday brought Daniel's ultimate move. A perfectly clear audio recording of his mother confessing to everything. His hands shook as he played the tape, with tears running down his 19-year-old face, which seemed to have aged by decades in just a few weeks. Karen's voice, slurred from wine, filled my kitchen like a toxic gas. I severed his brake lines, ruined his business contracts, took everything I could get my hands on, and I will do whatever is required to get rid of him for good. This neighborhood has no place for his type, bringing down our property values. Daniel, why are you recording this? Because someone will need proof when his body is discovered. The young man looked as though he had been shouldering the burden of his mother's wrongdoing for months. I cannot allow her to murder innocent people. She is my mother, but she is transformed into a monster that must be stopped. The state's single-party consent law meant the recording was fully admissible in court. The prosecution now had Karen's own voice admitting to attempted murder, business sabotage, theft, and premeditated violence. The weekend saw Walter call an emergency HOA meeting. A total of 47 homeowners filled the community center, a turnout not seen since the neighborhood was first established. The atmosphere was charged with a restrained anger that was finally being expressed after years of living in fear. I laid out the extensive evidence: security camera footage, documentation of financial fraud, patterns of criminal behavior, and Daniel's confession recording, as Karen's voice, admitting to attempted murder, echoed through the speakers. The room became silent, but for the sounds of shocked gasps and angry muttering. A motion was made to oust Karen from the HOA board, which passed with a vote of 42-5. Only her most out-of-touch supporters voted to keep an attempted murderer in a position of power. Karen tried to regain control of the meeting from the back of the room, but her reign had ended when she rose to speak. More than 40 residents drowned her out with years of pent-up rage. "Be quiet, Karen. We've had enough of your psychotic..." The legal net was closing in, with criminal charges on the horizon, civil lawsuits already filed. Her professional life in ruins, and no support from the community. Karen was looking at a minimum of 5 years in prison. In addition to complete financial collapse, however, cornered and desperate animals are the most dangerous of all. Sometimes, fate has a way of delivering justice with a surveyor's measuring tape and impeccable timing. In week 12, my lawyer recommended a professional property survey as part of my legal defense. "It's a standard step when you're dealing with harassment allegations," he noted. "It defines clear property lines and helps to avoid conflicts in the future." I contracted Precision Land Surveying, a team of 3 men with gear that was worth more than my truck, who regarded property boundaries with the reverence of sacred texts. The $1,200 fee felt like a small price to pay for protection against Karen's increasing instability. On Tuesday morning, the head surveyor, Jake Martinez, came to my door with an expression like someone who had just found King Tut's tomb. Behind him, his team was stowing their equipment with an uncharacteristic sense of excitement. "Mr. Sullivan, we must go over our findings right away. You'll probably want a drink for this." Jake laid out survey maps on my kitchen table, which looked like treasure maps. Red lines indicated the official property boundaries, while blue lines represented the existing buildings. At the point where Karen's showy stone driveway connected with my property, those lines revealed the most remarkable tale of criminal foolishness ever recorded. "Your neighbor's driveway is 12 feet over your property line. Based on satellite image analysis, it has been there for about 6 years. 12 magnificent feet of stolen property. Karen had taken 12 feet of my land to construct her custom driveway, which featured imported stone pavers and ornamental lighting that likely cost more than what most people pay for their cars." My morning coffee suddenly had the taste of triumph. The encroachment amounts to $8,000 in stolen property, not including the value of the improvements made on your land without your consent or payment. But Jake's subsequent disclosure was nothing short of a prosecutor's dream. County records indicate that Mrs. Peton was fully aware of the boundary violations when she constructed this eyesore. The previous owner, Harold Peterson, lodged several complaints that were mysteriously dropped after she threatened him with legal action. Karen had not made an accidental encroachment. She had intentionally stolen my property and intimidated the former owner into submission. Harold Peterson, a 78-year-old recent widower, was too scared and financially weak to stand up to Karen's methodical campaign of intimidation. Harold had submitted 3 formal complaints between 2018 and 2020, all of which were withdrawn after Karen dismissed his claims as baseless and threatened him with countersuits for harassment. The pattern became as clear as frost on a winter morning. Karen would single out susceptible individuals, take what she desired, and then use the legal system to intimidate her victims into silence through fear and financial strain. I was not her first target, just the first one reckless enough to retaliate. Jake went on, his voice filled with barely suppressed excitement. "In this state, adverse possession requires a period of 20 years or more. Since it has only been 6 years, she is considered to be trespassing with structures that are now legally yours. She is obligated to either remove everything at her own cost or provide you with fair market value compensation. The expenses for Karen to relocate would be at least $35,000. Her property had no other way of access without extensive digging and the rerouting of utilities. She was, in essence, caught in a trap of her own making, a mouse in a maze of her own criminal design. However, the legal consequences were even more severe. As a licensed real estate agent, Karen was professionally bound to inform all parties of any property encroachments. She had hidden her theft from county authorities, breached professional ethics, and engaged in classic real estate fraud while handling other clients' transactions. Her license mandates the disclosure of any boundary disputes that could affect real estate deals in the neighborhood. She has been concealing her own wrongdoing while collecting commissions from unsuspecting buyers and sellers. A professional transgression that automatically leads to a criminal investigation. As I sat in my kitchen, with the survey evidence spread before me and the faint scent of Jake's celebratory cigar in the air, I finally grasped Karen's complete psychological makeup. She hadn't singled me out for any personal reason. I was merely an obstacle in her criminal cover-up. Every fine, every violation, and every act of harassment was a strategic move to force me out before I could uncover her land theft. Karen was trying to safeguard a 6-year-long crime spree that she had disguised as the enforcement of neighborhood standards. The balance of power had completely shifted. I now possessed the means to bring about Karen's entire downfall. Criminal charges, professional ruin, financial collapse, and public disgrace. All contained in a manila folder labeled Survey Results. Karen had dedicated months to trying to ruin me. All the while she was sitting on the very evidence that would lead to her own complete destruction. The game was over. It was time to gather my legal A-team and make Karen's worst fears a reality. My initial call was to Patricia Chun. She was not related to Walter, but she was the top property lawyer in the county and had established her career by taking down HOA tyrants. Her law office had the aroma of leather-bound legal texts and high-quality coffee, the kind of environment where people like Karen were professionally taken apart. Mr. Sullivan, this is an excellent case. We have property encroachment, professional misconduct, and criminal fraud. It's like Christmas morning for property. Lawyers, Patricia's eyes shone with the excitement of a child discovering presents. We will be seeking triple damages, attorney's fees, and punitive compensation. Your neighbor has effectively given us a signed blank check. My second call was to Mike Rodriguez, a criminal defense attorney who was Tommy's brother and specialized in safeguarding victims from escalating harassment. Marcus, you are no longer just on the defensive. You are now on the offensive. We will work with the district attorney to make sure Karen faces the most severe consequences. My third call was to Sarah Kim, a business litigation expert who had earned her reputation by recovering damages from corporate sabotage. Your business losses are fully recoverable. We are dealing with insurance fraud, commercial interference, and damage to your reputation. We can expect substantial compensation. In addition to punitive damages, the legal costs would typically be enough to bankrupt a small business owner, but Patricia clarified a wonderful aspect of contingency fee agreements. We only get paid if you win, and with the evidence we have, our victory will be resounding. My experience with my divorce had taught me that hiring specialized lawyers may cost more at the outset, but it saves money in the long run by securing a clear victory rather than getting bogged down in endless appeals and postponements. The next step was to bring in James Park, a digital forensic specialist who handled all electronic evidence with the care of someone dealing with nuclear materials. Your neighbor's digital trail is unmistakable. There are fabricated photos, fraudulent emails, and incriminating communications. This evidence will hold up against any scrutiny. While my lawyers were plotting their legal strategy, Walter was rallying support from the neighborhood, acting like a retired general leading his troops. A total of 23 families submitted official complaints that bolstered my case, each one detailing Karen's consistent patterns of harassment over the years. She ruined the Martinez family with noise complaints about their baby, Walter stated, as he laid out signed affidavits on his dining room table like military maps. She targeted the Washingtons with architectural violations because of their wheelchair ramp. It was always the same method. Jennifer Walsh, an investigative reporter from Channel 7 News, got word of the story from local sources. HOA corruption, attempted murder, property theft. This story has all the elements that viewers are drawn to. It's a classic David versus Goliath narrative, and you have solid proof. The media coverage would deter Karen from any form of retaliation and shield the witnesses from intimidation. HOA bullies may thrive in obscurity, but they shrivel in the glare of public attention. like vampires exposed to sunlight. The financial plan came together perfectly. My commercial liability policy covered losses related to harassment, a detail I had picked up during my contractor training courses. Victims of Karen's actions often managed to get compensation through various avenues, including criminal restitution, civil court awards, and insurance payouts. The lawsuit for property encroachment was for $50,000, plus legal fees. According to county records, Karen's house had an equity of $180,000, which was more than enough to cover the full compensation and still leave some money for her prison commissary fund. However, the technical preparations uncovered even more damaging evidence. A comprehensive professional survey of the entire neighborhood revealed that Karen had encroached on 4 separate properties over a 6-year period. The total value of the stolen land was $31,000, which meant more victims and more criminal charges. An engineering evaluation of the removal of Karen's driveway showed that its construction had breached 3 building codes and was causing drainage issues in the neighborhood. An environmental impact assessment found that her unauthorized construction had led to flooding in 2 adjacent basements during periods of heavy rainfall. She built her personal vanity project without the necessary permits, proper drainage, or any consideration for the neighboring properties, explained Tom Bradley, the city engineer. Its removal will necessitate excavation, the relocation of utilities, and environmental cleanup. In the meantime, I was working in tandem with various agencies that were each developing their own cases. The district attorney's office was handling the criminal charges. The state licensing board was looking into professional ethics violations. The IRS was investigating possible tax fraud related to undeclared income from embezzlement, and the county planning department was scrutinizing all of Karen's previous projects for any other infractions. Each agency was building on the evidence provided by the others, creating a unified legal attack that would have impressed military planners. Karen was not up against a single adversary. She was encircled by a veritable army of prosecutors, investigators, and incensed neighbors who had been holding back their grievances for decades. Dr. Amanda Foster, a psychological consultant, analyzed Karen's behavioral traits to help anticipate her future actions. She exhibits classic narcissistic personality traits, with a fixation on control and racial biases. She singles out individuals she views as weak or different. When she feels trapped, you can expect extreme actions, possibly including violence. Are security measures involved? Installing enhanced monitoring systems, obtaining protective orders in advance, and enrolling Sophia in self-defense classes. In addition to establishing emergency procedures, my business operations were temporarily moved to secure facilities until Karen was no longer a threat. A community education initiative was started, featuring workshops on HOA reform, seminars on legal rights, and training on how to prevent corruption. We weren't merely aiming to defeat Karen. We were inoculating the entire neighborhood against any future despots. The community centers were packed for neighborhood meetings, with families recounting stories of Karen that they had been too fearful to share for years. The scent of newly printed informational flyers mingled with the sounds of people finding their voices again after being silenced by intimidation for so long. This is no longer just about Marcus, Walter declared to a full room. This is about ensuring that Karen can never again inflict terror on families. By the 14th week, the legal apparatus was fully in motion, and Karen was completely cornered. Criminal charges were awaiting. Civil lawsuits had been initiated. Her professional life was on the brink of collapse, and she had lost all community support. All that was left was to ignite the fuse and observe as Karen's empire came crashing down. Karen's desperation escalated to epic levels as she saw her world collapsing around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. In week 14, she made her most clumsy move yet. An attempt at bribery that was as obvious as a scene from a gangster film. I was in the middle of replacing an air handler at the community center when Karen materialized like a harbinger of doom, holding a manila envelope so full it could have choked a horse. Mr. Sullivan, perhaps we could come to a mutually agreeable solution. Her voice had the cloying sweetness of artificial vanilla laced with poison. $5,000 in cash to put this unfortunate incident behind us. The prosecutor's office had briefed me for this exact situation. I was equipped with a wiretap smaller than a postage stamp, which was recording her every word as Karen began to count out fresh $100 bills like a suburban drug lord. I realized that property boundaries can be perplexing. Errors are made. This amount should cover any trouble. you've been put through. And what about the break lines you severed, Karen? Her hands stopped in the middle of counting. I have no idea what you're talking about. The business contracts you tore up, the clients you lied to about my company. Sometimes, neighbors have their differences. The crucial thing is to move on in a positive way. Karen was admitting to property theft while also trying to bribe me into silence regarding her attempted murder. The recording device captured every self-incriminating statement as she essentially confessed to a criminal conspiracy while offering compensation for witness tampering. However, Karen was not yet finished with her self-destructive spree. She had retained a private investigator, a low-level operator who typically handled divorce and insurance fraud cases, to find any compromising information about my personal life. The man looked like he had failed his training to be a mall security guard and reeked of cigarettes and desperation. In a matter of days, fabricated online reviews began to appear, systematically ruining my business's reputation. One-star ratings asserted that I had caused property damage, overcharged for services, and performed unsafe installations. Karen had turned the internet into her personal weapon. Like a digital terrorist, at the same time, she reached out to my ex-wife, Jennifer, in an attempt to pull her into the campaign of harassment. Your former husband is creating significant issues in our community. Maybe you could have a word with him about conducting himself properly. Jennifer, to her credit, contacted me right away. Marcus, some deranged woman is trying to drag me into whatever suburban mess you've gotten yourself into. She sounds completely unhinged. Karen's efforts to enlist support were backfiring in a spectacular fashion. Each action she took only highlighted her growing desperation and criminal motives, while also handing more evidence to the prosecutors. In the meantime, I adopted a strategy of silence, like a chess grandmaster observing his opponent dismantle their own position. Every bribery offer was recorded and handed over to the authorities. My own counter-surveillance showed that Karen's PI was mostly just taking pictures of me cutting the grass and taking out the trash. Hardly criminal activities. The great thing about letting your adversaries bring about their own downfall is that they invariably push beyond all rational boundaries when they meet no resistance. Karen saw my silence not as a strategic rope I was giving her, but as a sign of weakness. In week 15, Karen began to consolidate her support with the last 3 loyal members of the HOA board. They tried to convene an emergency meeting to discuss the neighborhood disruption that they claimed was caused by frivolous lawsuits and the harassment of board members. The notice for the meeting was legally flawed. It had improper timing, inadequate notification, and a vague agenda. But more crucially, my lawyer had already secured injunctions that barred any HOA actions while the criminal investigation was ongoing. Karen's desperate maneuver to use official procedures backfired when 47 homeowners appeared at the meeting, all demanding her immediate ouster. What she had planned as a rigged trial turned into a public condemnation of what little credibility she had left. Karen Peton has been terrorizing this neighborhood for 8 years, exclaimed Mrs. Rodriguez, whose family had been one of Karen's victims in 2019. We insist on her being held accountable for her crimes. The intended meeting quickly devolved into a group therapy session, with families sharing harrowing experiences they had kept to themselves for years. Karen sat in the front row, witnessing the collapse of her legacy as residents recounted instances of systematic harassment, financial fraud, and psychological abuse. However, Karen's most damaging move was still to come. In a desperate attempt to plant evidence to support her claims of being harassed, she tried to break into my workshop again. While I was at the hospital installing equipment this time, she came with bolt cutters, a digital camera, and what seemed to be illegal drugs, likely with the intention of photographing fabricated evidence that would ruin my reputation and credibility. Unfortunately for Karen, my new and improved security system featured motion-activated alarms that were linked directly to the police dispatch. Officers were on the scene while she was still inside my workshop, holding bolt cutters and a bag that looked suspiciously like cocaine. Ma'am, please drop the tools and move away from the filing cabinet. The arrest was all captured on high-definition video. Karen's face went through a rapid succession of surprise, anger, and fear as the handcuffs were fastened around her wrists. The sound of metal on bone seemed to symbolize her total and utter defeat. The cold steel of the handcuffs dug into Karen's wrists as she wept about misunderstandings and her efforts to protect community standards. The woman who had been a source of terror for 17 families was at last facing the repercussions of her actions. Detective Wilson's voice held a tone of grim satisfaction. Karen Peton, you are being placed under arrest for breaking and entering, possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute, and for violating restraining orders. Karen's reign was not just collapsing. It was imploding in a spectacular manner, with the entire neighborhood as witnesses to the long-awaited arrival of justice. Karen's last few weeks of liberty were like something out of a psychological thriller, directed by someone who had clearly lost all sense of reality. In week 16, she produced her crowning achievement in foolishness. A series of false police reports filed with the fervor of someone pursuing a doctorate in self-sabotage. Each morning brought fresh emergency calls about fictitious crimes I had supposedly committed. 911, what is your emergency? Marcus Sullivan is in his driveway threatening me with a chainsaw. All the while, I was 60 miles from home, installing commercial refrigeration systems, completely oblivious to the fact that Karen was racking up felony charges against herself at a rate faster than a machine gun fires rounds. On Tuesday, he is watching my house with binoculars. I was at the hospital replacing ductwork on Wednesday, loud music and swearing at 3:00 a.m. I was sound asleep with my white noise machine on. On Thursday, he smashed my mailbox with a baseball bat. Security footage clearly showed Karen vandalizing her own mailbox at 2 a.m., seemingly having forgotten about the very neighborhood cameras she had been complaining about for months. Each fabricated report necessitated a police visit, an investigation, and the filing of paperwork, each one added to her growing list of criminal charges, as the officers became more and more annoyed with Karen's obvious falsehoods. Detective Wilson's voice, after the seventh bogus call, was filled with a deadly weariness. Mrs. Peton, making false police reports is a felony. We have security camera evidence that proves your claims are untrue. Make one more honest call, and you will be arrested. However, Karen's desperation had progressed beyond the realm of rational thinking. She started to tail Walter Chen's grandchildren on their way to school, lurking in her BMW like a suburban predator, observing 8-year-olds as they walked to their bus stops. Mrs. Chen contacted the police without delay. There is an unfamiliar woman taking pictures of children and noting down their schedules. It feels extremely threatening. Karen's campaign of witness intimidation escalated to include the vandalism of cars belonging to those who had signed the petition. The damage included scratched paint, slashed tires, and broken mirrors, amounting to thousands of dollars in property destruction, all of which was captured in stunning detail by security cameras. The scent of spray paint, mixed with Karen's perfume, hung around the damaged vehicles, a testament to her complete psychological collapse. She was, in effect, creating a documentary of her own criminal activities while her neighbors looked on in a mixture of horror and fascination. The police added witness intimidation, stalking, and property destruction to Karen's already extensive criminal record. The woman was accumulating felony charges at a rate comparable to a Las Vegas slot machine hitting jackpots. In the meantime, I remained strategically out of sight, like a phantom haunting Karen's every waking thought. Every false accusation was refuted with time. Stamped proof, every act of vandalism was recorded and passed on to the prosecutors. Every desperate action she took only served to tighten the legal net around her. The beauty of being patient is that you get to watch your adversaries bring about their own ruin while you enjoy your coffee and document their self-destruction for later amusement. However, the pinnacle of Karen's foolishness was her attempt to manipulate the media. She reached out to Channel 7 News, claiming to be a victim of harassment, apparently forgetting that investigative reporter Jennifer Walsh had already dedicated weeks to looking into her criminal background. I am being harassed by a violent neighbor who is attempting to take my property and ruin my family, Karen declared to the news cameras, with the sincerity of a community theater actor trying out for the role of Lady Macbeth. Walsh's follow-up questions dismantled Karen's story faster than a controlled demolition. Mrs. Peton, we have audio recordings of you admitting to cutting brake lines and destroying business contracts. How do you account for those statements? The sight of Karen's face on television, shifting through confusion, anger, and panic, became a source of entertainment for the neighborhood. The interview, which was intended to elicit sympathy, instead gave the prosecution more proof of Karen's delusional state of mind and criminal motives. Social media lit up with local residents sharing their own horror stories about Karen. The hashtag Karen Pettin went viral in the area as families uploaded pictures of fraudulent violations, harassment records, and evidence of property damage. Karen had turned into a cautionary tale of HOA overreach, all while being the star of her own public downfall. In week 17, Daniel made his definitive break from family allegiance. Karen's son appeared before the grand jury, giving prosecutors an inside look at his mother's criminal schemes and her declining mental state. She maintained journals in which she detailed her campaigns of harassment. There were plans for increasingly violent acts, which included looking up how to make assaults seem like accidents. She has completely lost her grip on reality. Daniel's testimony was particularly damaging because it was delivered by someone who had first-hand knowledge of Karen's mindset and tactics. He recounted years of seeing his mother systematically ruin families, all the while claiming her actions were to protect community standards. She truly thinks she is protecting the neighborhood from undesirable people. In her view, harassment and violence are acceptable means to maintain property values and social hierarchy. The grand jury returned indictments on 23 distinct criminal charges, which included attempted murder, witness tampering, insurance fraud, mail theft, property destruction, stalking, filing false police reports, and engaging in organized criminal activity. Karen's bail was set at $250,000, an amount she was unable to raise after her legal expenses had depleted her available funds. She was to be held in the county jail pending her trial, where a standard orange jumpsuit would take the place of her designer attire, and a metal cot would serve as her bed instead of her king-size one. The woman who had been a source of terror for families for years was at last confined. Like the dangerous predator she had always been, justice had the taste of morning coffee blended with a sweet sense of revenge. Week 18 brought the legal confrontation that would be talked about in the neighborhood for the next half-century. The preliminary hearing drew a crowd to the county courthouse that was comparable to a major championship boxing match. Local television news crews were positioned all along the hallway. As Channel 7's investigative report had made Karen the face of HOA corruption, every seat in the courtroom was taken by neighbors, who were treating the event like a piece of dinner theater where the antagonist finally receives her just desserts. Karen entered the room in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, her former polished look replaced by the indignity of prison attire. She had dark circles under her eyes, her hair was unkempt, and she carried the air of someone who had spent the last 3 weeks contemplating a life sentence. The sound of her shackles dragging on the courtroom floor was like a countdown to justice. Judge Patricia Morrison, a stern and experienced judge who had encountered every kind of criminal folly, called the full courtroom to order with a strike of her gavel that brought all conversations to an immediate halt. The state of Colorado versus Karen Elizabeth Pettin, 23 felony counts, including attempted murder, organized criminal activity, and witness tampering. Prosecutor David Chun, who was Walter's nephew and had made a name for himself by taking down white-collar criminals, rose to lay out the evidence with the excitement of someone on the verge of setting off a nuclear device. Your Honor, this case is about a systematic criminal operation that was concealed under the guise of neighborhood management. The defendant exploited her HOA position to carry out theft, harassment, fraud, and an attempt at murder over a period of 8 years. The presentation of evidence was both devastating and systematic. Security camera footage showed Karen severing brake lines with the precision of a surgeon. Audio recordings played her confession to numerous felonies. While her son sobbed in the gallery, financial forensic analysis revealed that $30,000 had been embezzled to fund her campaigns of harassment. Property surveys, displayed on the courtroom screens, clearly showed Karen's intentional land theft across several properties. Engineering reports outlined the building code violations and environmental harm caused by her unauthorized construction. Karen's public defender, an overworked lawyer who had been assigned the unenviable case, tried to mitigate the damage in a way that was as effective as trying to hold back a tidal wave with a small umbrella. Your Honor, my client is a dedicated member of the community who may have shown poor judgment, but she never had any criminal intentions. Judge Morrison's expression indicated that she had heard more convincing arguments from people fighting parking tickets. The decisive moment arrived when Daniel was called to the witness stand to testify against his own mother. The courtroom was completely silent, except for Karen's stifled sobs, as her son prioritized justice over family ties. Your Honor, My mother kept extensive journals in which she chronicled her harassment campaigns. She looked into ways to make acts of violence seem like accidents. She had a genuine plan to kill Marcus Sullivan and felt she was in the right. Daniel's voice was heavy with the burden of someone who had witnessed evil disguised as community service for years. She told me on multiple occasions that certain people were not fit to live in our neighborhood. By that, she meant anyone who was not white, affluent, or prepared to bow to her will. A collective gasp went through the gallery as Daniel exposed Karen's racist motives, her systematic targeting of minorities, and her escalating plans for violence. His testimony shifted the case from a simple neighborhood conflict to a hate crime prosecution. Karen's lawyer tried to cross-examine him, but Daniel's responses were both damning and precise. He presented photos of Karen's journals, recordings of her planning meetings, and proof of her psychological decline over several months. Did your mother ever show any regret for what she did? No, Your Honor. She only expressed annoyance that her victims were not dying quickly enough. The courtroom was filled with shocked murmurs until Judge Morrison brought back order with another strike of her gavel. Prosecutor Chen's closing remarks were like a sweeping condemnation of systemic HOA abuse across the country. This defendant turned community governance into a weapon to commit crimes that have terrorized families for almost a decade. She is the embodiment of everything that is wrong with unchecked power in residential communities. The evidence clearly shows premeditated attempted murder, systematic theft, witness intimidation, and an organized criminal operation. Karen Peton is not a concerned neighbor. She is a domestic terrorist who exploited her position in the HOA to commit felonies. Judge Morrison's decision was delivered with speed and firmness. All criminal charges will proceed to trial. The defendant is a clear threat to the safety of the community and has shown a complete lack of respect for the law. Bail is denied. The defendant will be held in custody until the trial. The freeze on her assets will be maintained to ensure funds are available for victim compensation. Karen's legs gave way as the reality hit her that she would be spending months in jail, awaiting a trial that was likely to lead to a prison sentence of several decades. Her life of luxury had come to an end with handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. Outside the courthouse, the media gathered like a swarm of locusts at a disaster scene. I made a short statement as neighbors applauded and Karen's victims, at last feeling secure, began to speak openly. This case demonstrates that bullies cannot hide behind a veil of official power indefinitely. Karen Peton has terrorized families for years, but justice has finally been served. No one should have to live in fear of corrupt HOA despots. Walter Chen's voice was filled with the satisfaction that comes from decades of battling Karen's oppression. Today is not just a win for Marcus Sullivan, it's about safeguarding future families from HOA abuse. The crowd that had gathered outside the courthouse was like a neighborhood party, celebrating the conclusion of an 8-year period of terror. Children were playing without fear as their parents exchanged stories of their newfound freedom from Karen's psychological manipulation. Justice had finally made its way to Willowbrook Estates, robed as a judge and wielding a gavel of accountability. 6 months down the line, justice rendered its final judgment with the gratifying certainty of a perfectly calibrated HVAC system engaging. Karen was sentenced to 4 years in state prison and ordered to pay $180,000 in restitution, which covered every cent she had embezzled from HOA funds and through property theft. Her home was sold at auction to pay for legal damages, and any remaining money was given to her 17 previous victims, who had never been compensated for the years of harassment. They endured. The sound of the auctioneer's gavel coming down on Karen's former residence was more joyful than Christmas morning. The new owners promptly tore down her illegal driveway and replaced it with a beautiful privacy fence along my restored property line, which made a satisfying click every time I secured the gate where her stolen driveway once lay. Daniel was accepted into Colorado State to study criminal justice, his education supported by the Second Chance Scholarship I created with the proceeds from book sales and speaking engagements. The young man who had prioritized moral integrity over family ties was deserving of every chance to forge a life committed to defending others from tyrants like his mother. Mr. Sullivan, I can't express how grateful I am for your help in finding the courage to do what was right. Daniel told me during our final coffee meeting before he headed off to college. My mother's victims deserve justice, and you taught me how to stand up for it. Willowbrook Estates was transformed into the tranquil community it was always intended to be. The new HOA leadership established a policy of complete transparency, With monthly financial disclosures, public meetings, and democratic processes, new anti-harassment rules were put in place to safeguard all residents, irrespective of their race, income, or family situation. Property values saw a 12% increase as a result of the enhanced community cohesion. Neighbors now engage with one another, organizing block parties and setting up youth sports teams. The aroma of barbecue smoke and the sound of children's laughter have taken the place of the tension that had pervaded our streets for 8 long years. My business flourished beyond all expectations. Clients valued the integrity I had shown throughout the ordeal with Karen, which resulted in expanded contracts and a broad referral network across the region. I brought on 3 more technicians and launched a second location, demonstrating that confronting bullies often enhances one's professional standing rather than harming it. The key lesson I learned is that bullies expect their victims to remain quiet, but communities will support those who are brave enough to challenge them openly. My YouTube channel, Fighting HOA Bullies, garnered 500,000 subscribers, assisting victims across the country in documenting harassment and seeking legal action. Each week, I received messages from families who had successfully used my methods to overcome their own local despots. "Thank you for showing us that HOA bullies are not invincible," wrote Sarah from Phoenix. "We used your documentation techniques, and our own Karen is now facing criminal charges." My speaking engagements have taken me all over the nation, where I educate communities on how to identify, record, and take legal action against HOA misconduct. State lawmakers have sought my input in the drafting of Karen's Law, a comprehensive set of HOA reforms that mandate financial audits, establish term limits, and include recall provisions. The effects of these efforts have extended beyond just individual successes. The county has introduced new requirements for HOA oversight, mandatory transparency regulations, and protocols for preventing abuse. Other local governments have followed suit, bringing about systemic changes that will safeguard thousands of families in the future. My relationship with Sophia has deepened through this shared experience. Our bond has been reinforced by seeing justice triumph over coercion. She has learned important lessons about confronting bullies, the importance of documenting evidence, and the power of community solidarity. My daughter now dedicates her time to the Scholarship Fund, where she mentors young people who are faced with challenging ethical choices. My Sunday morning coffee with Walter has become a regular ritual. We are 2 veterans swapping tales of defeating adversaries through a combination of patience, thorough preparation, and community unity. His steady, weathered hands would turn the pages of the newspaper, which often reported on yet another victory for HOA reform in nearby counties. "Son, you did more than just defeat Karen," Walter remarked during our last chat before he and his family relocated to Florida. "You fundamentally altered the way communities deal with bullies." The yearly Willowbrook Unity Festival now honors diversity and community collaboration, with an array of food trucks, live music, and informational stands on residents' rights. Individuals who were once victims of Karen now hold positions on the HOA board, guaranteeing that accountability will prevent any future despots. My back deck has become the ideal place for evening contemplation, offering a view of the fence that now stands on my reclaimed property line. The solid click of the gate serves as a daily reminder that while justice demands constant watchfulness, it ultimately rewards bravery with enduring tranquility. The documentary Neighborhood Tyrant received a regional Emmy, drawing national focus to the issue of HOA reform and setting a legal standard for protecting residents from harassment. Karen's story has become a classic example of how unchecked power leads to corruption. Absolutely. Leave a comment to share your own HOA horror story. Let's create a community of individuals who will not be cowed by petty tyrants. Click the subscribe button for more tales of David and Goliath, where justice is served and bullies are held accountable. Next week, I'll share how I turned the HOA's own rules against them. Another instance of transforming bureaucracy into a form of sweet revenge. Remember, it's your property, your rights, and your community. Stand up for them all. Another day, another HOA conflict resolved. If this story made you shake your head or pump your fist in triumph, please hit that like button, share your own HOA story below, and subscribe so you won't miss any future showdowns in the battle against bullies.